Hello and welcome to You Wellbeing. I'm Ashley Meyer and I'm here today with my colleague Carolyn Leigh. Hi Carolyn.
Hi Ashley.
Carolyn is a clinical nutritionist and we discuss at great length the multifactorial nature of ME and chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yes.
Carolyn addresses it from a physiological nutrition perspective. I address it more from the emotional psychological perspective. And I know through the various discussions we've had, there's clearly sort of a lot of overlap between the two areas.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
we can't actually sort of put them separately at all, mind
No.
and body. So I know that one of the areas that we talk about quite a lot is adrenal fatigue.
Yes.
And knowing that people arrive to either one of us and talk about sort of their history, factors are very different one to the other.
Yes.
But very clearly, most people present with adrenal fatigue.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, Carolyn, perhaps you sort of want to talk a little bit about how you see that arising.
Okay. I think I'd start with stress.
Okay.
I think stress is probably one of the number one causes of adrenal fatigue without a doubt. However, there is also a internal physiological cause of adrenal fatigue.
Okay, so I know when we allude to stress, we talk very much about the maladaptive stress response.
Yeah.
And what we tend to think happens there is that in that state, the digestive system isn't functioning properly, the immune system isn't functioning
That's correct.
properly,
Yes.
and sort of as a result, the body is sort of being driven at a much higher rate
Yes.
than really it should be.
Absolutely.
Now,
Well, I mean, in my training, in the way I work, we believe all disease starts in the gut. And it starts with your beneficial bacteria. And you've all heard of beneficial bacteria with your Yakult and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And this is basically your first port of defense. Your immune system starts with your beneficial bacteria. Stress can lower beneficial bacteria, and this is just the beginning of a cycle, of a downhill cycle for somebody. Antibiotics can lower beneficial bacteria. Alcohol, smoking,
okay.
lifestyle alone.
Okay, so people have been living a lifestyle whereby they've been working in a very stressful environment, sort
Yeah.
of very long hours,
Yeah.
working hard, playing hard, not eating very healthy food, smoking,
That's
drinking,
right, pushing themselves to the limit. Yeah.
pushing themselves to the limit. That starts to put a load on their system.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It
And the more
might,
their
yes.
system becomes overloaded, the more their system has to push in order to keep afloat,
Yes,
essentially.
I mean, we're all individuals, so there might be one individual who can cope with that and have absolutely no problems at all. But genetically, because we're different, we're all prone to different things, and someone else is going to get chronically ill. Someone else might get cancer.
Okay.
There's always something that goes wrong if you are not genetically strong enough to withstand all the rubbish that's going on being thrown at you. And we're talking also about pollutants,
Yeah.
the environment. I mean, it's in our food, it's in our water. I mean, we are literally just being bombarded with heavy, awful metals, as you know, in the environment, chemicals, pollution. So there's a whole list of things you could just go on about.
Okay, so the more the system becomes overloaded, the more the system becomes stressed, that has an impact on the good bacteria.
Yes, and it's like, well, the body is like an orchestra. If you think of the body as like one instrument goes wrong, the rest of the orchestra starts to play badly. So what happens when the gut goes wrong is it causes stress on other organs in the body and other systems in the body. And this is where it leads to adrenal stress, because the adrenal glands have to cope with all the stress that's going on in the body. And this forces adrenaline to be pumped out far too great and far too often, and it causes adrenal exhaustion. And what is adrenal exhaustion? Well, the adrenals are not just responsible for the hormone adrenaline. They are part of our hormonal system, and they produce a very, very important hormone called cortisol.
Right.
Now, we've probably all heard of cortisol because it's used as an anti-inflammatory, and I have spoken about this before, but cortisol is necessary for energy. It's our fuel. The same way we put diesel or petrol in a car, if our cortisol levels are not correct, we will not function properly with energy. So when we become ill, like I did personally, your cortisol levels will be lowered so far down that you just haven't got any energy. And that is a major problem, because that is what is adrenal exhaustion.
Okay, so when your adrenals are under such significant strain,
Yes.
then the cortisol is not being produced to
It's
the
not being
appropriate
produced,
level.
absolutely. And if it's
Okay.
not being produced properly, then your energy levels will be very, very low.
Okay, so I know that we address this from two different sides.
Yes.
So from our side, we talk very much about addressing the stress drivers,
Yes.
the stress factors, from a psychological perspective, because from your side, you're addressing the actual organ.
Yes.
And actually trying to sort of support things from a physiological
Yes.
side of things.
Yes. I mean, obviously, you have to address both,
Hmm.
because if there's a huge amount of stress still psychologically on the body, it doesn't matter what you do nutritionally, it won't go away.
Absolutely.
It has to be addressed. But if it can be done together, then the organ can be repaired. It can be actually rebuilt. But diet alone will never do this.
Yeah.
And this is a misapprehension that a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to get better again. You have to have specific nutrients at very high therapeutic levels, and these are quite sophisticated nutrients. And this is a very specialist area
Right.
to actually get those adrenals working again physically, if they're that low, if you
Okay.
can't do it any other way.
Okay, so the correct nutritional approach to supporting the adrenals, plus addressing psychological factors, lifestyle
Yes.
factors, that's the kind of combination we're looking at for repairing the adrenal glands.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then we're looking at sort of a greater chance of restoring our cortisol levels.
Absolutely, and this can be tested through private laboratories, and the laboratory that does this is regulated as highly as any hospital laboratory. So these tests are highly accredited, and cortisol can be tested, and it should be tested over a 12-hour period,
Okay.
because you have a curve of cortisol. Which starts very high in the morning and it comes down gradually to make us nice and sleepy in the evening. So I've seen people who are literally bottomed out.
Yeah.
So this is a good way of testing and looking at it to actually prove, if you need this kind of proof, if you need it in black and white, it can be done.
Okay, and you actually said something very important a few moments ago, which was sleep.
Oh gosh, yes.
So if our cortisol level is affected to that extent, then clearly that's going to have an impact on our sleep.
One of the symptoms, and I'm sure you see this all the time, is insomnia.
Yeah.
If your cortisol levels aren't right, and your whole adrenals are stressed, it's going to stop you sleeping.
Okay.
And I've seen people who've actually had their cortisol levels raised in the evening because everything's out of whack.
Okay.
Completely.
Okay, and so that if we aren't sleeping sufficient, clearly we're not getting restorative energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's just exacerbating the whole
Yes.
situation
Yes.
and increasing the stress situation.
Yes, and not only that, but the adrenals will affect the neurotransmitters, which again is serotonin, melatonin. So you start to get the insomnia more because there's lack of melatonin. You start to have lowered serotonin. And we're talking about even going further towards depression and things like that.
Yeah.
So all the psychological, the whole thing comes together even greater.
Okay, so really working with the adrenals is a key element
Absolutely
in
key.
recovery.
Yes,
Carolyn, thank you very much.
thank you.
And if you'd like further information, please have a look at our website www.uwellbeing.com. Thank you very much.